My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with originally is from DC, but now resides in New York. He embodies a deep commitment to making a positive impact in the lives of others. Within this episode, we discussed transitioning at work, and he discussed in great detail how he did a lot of research prior to transitioning, not just at work, but in his own personal life. We also talked about navigating the workspace. We discussed allyship. What does good allyship look like? And he gave some really great advice to folks who are looking to become better allies. We also discussed intersectionality of race and gender, identity, and public spaces. This episode was great. And we had a lot of great nuggets about just the transition journey and getting started on a transition journey if that's the journey that you choose. I hope that you enjoy this episode.
Dem Bois, Dem Bois, amplifying, transmitting color voices, yeah, we here making noise, yeah, making noise, yeah. Visibility equals possibility, you know we them boys, yeah, them boys, yeah. Amplifying, transmitting color.
Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and my next guest is based in New York. A dedicated leader committed to driving economic growth in underserved communities. His work focuses on creating opportunities and fostering development in areas that need it the most. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for folks so that they know who you are, name, pronouns.
Yes, my name is Nasir Young, Nas for short. My pronouns are he, him, his.
So I love to ask people, this is only Nas and Nasir I know is one of my favorite rappers because he's also from New York, correct? And so I love to ask guests, like, how did that name Nasir choose you?
The name Nasir, wow. So actually it is derived from one of the greatest rappers of all time, Nas. So that name, comes from him. I've always admired, not Nas as just the MC, but um, just his presence alone. Like a lot of the things that he did in hip hop, was monumental, both back then and now. And also the meaning of Nasir is also very powerful too. And then I also, wanted a name that could be shortened because growing up, I always had a nickname. So I was never really called by my birth name. I was always called by a nickname. And, as I was going through my transition, I wanted to, find a name that was, of course, had a powerful meaning to it, but also a name that I could shorten. So Nasir really spoke to me, as well as, of course, Nas. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna just, choose this name, as the new part of me in my new journey, new chapter.
Yeah. I love that. So, but you look kind of young. What you know about Nas? What's your knowledge on Nas? Let me know.
So my knowledge of Nas stems from early 2000s. So the early 2000s. I remember when I was in elementary school, it was like he had released a song, forgetting the title, but it had like children in the background, like I know I am what I want to be. So that song really stuck to me because I was in elementary school, and I was like, all right, well, I'm at this point in my life where I was young, of this trying to figure out what I wanted to be in life, career wise. And when that song dropped, I was like, wow, like this song is really influential, and me trying to figure out, what career lane I wanted to go into. So that's just one instinct with Nas. Also, growing up, it was always Nas versus Jay-Z. So that battle was going on for years. But this also observing that because back then, rap beats were different. And I remember where they had this. It was like a segment, not on BT, but like they have like the beef. So like the DVD. So like the beef episodes. Where they had like T.I. versus Lil Flip. They had 50 Cent versus Ja Rule, 50 Cent versus everybody, basically. So that era of hip hop. But yeah, so Nas was in a sense, he played a little minor role in my upbringing. So, and actually, I'm from Washington D.C., born and raised. So, when you have people in hip hop or any musical lane that has a presence outside of where they're from, it's huge. So
I love that. I was just thinking when you were talking because you were saying that song. I can't remember how the song go, but with the kids in the background, but I'm like, man, I mean, it tells my age because I remember when Nas first came out. I was in junior high school, and so I remember learning a little bit later when I learned how to drive. Nas and Jay-Z was the tape decks I put in the stereo in the car. So that was my driving force. So I drive me and my friends around and we was listening to Nas and Jay-Z. So I love that's just like an inspiration for your name. And I love that name. And did you tell her what the meaning of Nasir means?
the meaning of Nasir, it means well, one of the meanings is helper. And also a lot of individuals with that name are within the Muslim religion, or from of course the Middle East, or a country in Africa. And even now when I get into the Uber, and I have an Uber driver, and they be talking to me. They be like, they give me a greeting, either a Muslim greeting, or they be like, hey, your mom, like, she did a good job with giving you that name. That name is very powerful. And I'm listening in the passenger seat, like, even though, like, I gave you that name. Like, quiet as it's kept. I get, that name came from me. Well, Nas, but yeah, so with that name, a lot of people connects to it a lot, when it comes to like the origin of that particular name.
I love that. I'm glad that the name chose you and you chose the name. And sometimes that, people speak, but like now we had the choice to give our own selves the name that resonated with us and who we are in this world today. And so just to have that sort of like privilege on you, like, nah, I name myself, right? And like, how does that feel to be like, nah, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about, I name myself. How does that feel for you?
Exactly. It feels good. I mean, because as individuals, who are trans, more than likely we're not really open about how we choose our name. And like for me, just being called out, like in the Uber, people like, oh yeah, the name, or at work, or out on the streets, or someone I interact with, they always think of Nas, like you say, the rapper. And for me, it's I feel like choosing a name is you don't really think too deeply into it until you have the opportunity to change your name. And I remember at one of my old jobs, interacting with someone who's from a different country, and their name is long. And it's hard for people in America to like pronounce it. So, they basically told me the story about how they chose to not necessarily go through the name change process, but to go to HR and be like, hey, when it comes to the internal system, could you change my name to this American name? So that individuals, in a workplace could be able to not necessarily connect with me, because I'm not, from here, but as a way in which take ownership of my identity and who I am. Um, so just hearing that, I was like, yeah, that also aligns with me too, because when changing your name, you are taking ownership of your identity. Um, and not really disconnecting with your old self, but you want to take ownership of who you are um, as you progress through your transition. And a lot of that ownership, it takes time because we're worried about what people are going to think or what people are going to say and how they perceive us. So that's another thing too that I also took into consideration when really feeling like, wow, like this is my new name and this is something that's going to be connected with me forever. So,
I know on the previous episode, I can't remember which exact episode number, but one the guest was asking other trans men to think creatively in a way of our names and not just take a derivative of our birth names, but to really dig deep and think of names that really resonated and spoke to us deeper than the derivative of our birth name, right? And how like sometimes people pick that because it's easier for people to I want to say they take the derivative of their birth name to make it easier for people to call them their new name, right? So if it's just like something short of what people used to call you, right? And so I think that speaks volumes to like if we can name ourselves something that doesn't make other people feel comfortable, but that really resonates with us as we transition and as we grow as people. And in my own name, I'm guilty of it too, right? So my birth name, and I rarely say this, my birth name was my derivative of my name Sean came from my middle name, which my middle name was Shantae, and so people always call me Sean anyway. And so I just said, oh, that's just easy, right? I just felt like a Sean. And so I took that. I didn't like my birth name, the first part of my name. But I never thought anything different of, okay, not being Sean. Or what if I wanted to choose another name, right? And so even after recording that episode, I've been thinking of, maybe I want to, I go by Sean Aaron, and Aaron is because that's the name that my son gave me. But I also want to think like, do I want to be something else now? Like I could be Sean, but do I want to name myself? You know what I mean? Like we can change our names as many times as we want, and can afford to, I should say, right? Because it does cost money to change your name. But like, I love how you really listen to what spoke to you and didn't care about, a derivative or if making people feel comfortable with your name. You just like, nah, this is me, and this is the name I'm going with. So I love that.
Yeah, definitely. And it took time to really get to that place where, just don't care and, you living, your truth and living for you and not for anybody else. So, I'm very thankful that I was given this opportunity to change my name. So very happy about that.
Yeah, I'm happy that you were here in this world, Nasir. I really am. And so I want you to, if at whatever level feels comfortable for you, to just tell us your transition journey from any place from where you feel comfortable up until now.
Yes, well, actually, I am celebrating my 5th anniversary of transitioning this year, so really excited about that.
Yes, big ups to you.
Yes, like I'm like, wow, 5 years. I feel like, once COVID hit, it's like a blur. It's like so much has happened even this year. But yeah, so it started pre-COVID, in 2019, my transition, officially. I would say my transition has always started, since I was younger. I always had a lot of thoughts about my identity. I was always a tomboy, always into wrestling. So WWF at the time, now WWE, always into sports. So as a young child, you're introduced to Barbies, you're introduced to the color pink, you're introduced to a lot of feminine things as a young child, but I personally felt like I was always connected with those masculine toys or anything that was connected to the masculine identity. As of course, that's what society, is putting out there. So I would say sports, wrestling, of course, when it came to, me trying to figure out, the love interest too. I was always connected with at the time, femininity in women. Um, and it took me a while to really be acceptance of this and be open with it because at the time, of course, time has changed now, but at the time, it was either, okay, you're gay or you're straight, no in between, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When it comes to, within domestically, within your family, and also within school, as well as the workplace. It was always those two things. Um, I feel like, throughout the years, from elementary to high school, I always had these questions about my identity and who I was. And I think that college was when I had the opportunity to really just think more deeply into it. based on, of course, when you have these university colleges who have these, gender studies classes, these sexuality classes, you're also interacting with individuals from other backgrounds, other sexualities. So it really gave me the opportunity to get outside of my box and be open to learning more about my identity and not feeling ashamed about it or not caring about what other people would think. So in college was when I actually had that opportunity to really dig deep into who I am. And I would say post college was when I said, okay, I'm actually going to really push forth into doing my research on how to transition, how to go about it. And my research wasn't just about the health part of it, so not just about the shots, tea, but I also wanted to see, okay, how will life be, afterwards? So afterwards meaning after I start to look different, how will my life be? How will my life be in interactions with my peers, whether that's family, friends, as well as the workplace? Um, because I knew that, you know, my transition was going to be publicly, openly. I wasn't going to be able to hide it. So I had to really just dig deep and do my research. Research far as on social media. So this was a day and age where social media was starting to get popular. So was the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, trying to see visualizations of trans men, even though it was very hard, especially trans men of color. Like really like finding someone, not being on some stalkerist stuff, like I'm creepily trying to look at people to see, okay, but actually seeing, okay, about their transition stories, both health wise, both socially. Um, so I would say it took me a little while with my research because of course it was times where, I stopped and I was like, I don't know. I'm still worried about what others may think about me. I'm worried about, having a full-time job. It's like, okay, it's going to be awkward. Like, so, it took me a while to really like be confident and taking that first step. And I would say, when I moved up here in 2019, to New York from DC was when I really said, okay, I'm going to just take the initiative and I'm going to move forward with this transition. And my transition started in various phases. So, of course, it started with me, getting my T shots first. My second phase of it was the name change. Um, and then I would say the third phase, which is ongoing, is me being acceptance of who I am publicly in public spaces. I will say that, with transitioning, you're more focused on um like the family aspect of it, the friendship aspect of it, the love aspect of it, but not really about, okay, how society will perceive me, because me going from a Black lesbian to, okay, I have to put this in perspective, going from Black lesbian to, okay, people who don't know, they're going to see me as being a Black man. So it's like, all right, that identity changes. So what I went through as a Black lesbian, there are going to be certain aspects of my identity that I'm not going to go through now and publicly. Like, for example, in the store, I was perceived as a Black lesbian, but now I'm going to be perceived as a Black man, you know? In the workplace, I'm going from a Black lesbian to a Black man in the workplace. When it comes to family, like, so I was thinking about that too, because, the ethnicity stays there. So I'm Black, no matter what. Um, but it's just me, thinking and being worried about, okay, well, how am I going to be perceived outside? out in these spaces, because what I went through as a Black lesbian when I was a stud, how does that transition to me being perceived as a Black man in these spaces, or a Black trans man in these spaces too? Or now, because there are people who are ignorant, they still see me as that Black lesbian, So, trying to figure out how to navigate these spaces through my transition is, what I came across throughout that time period and still do. So
That's very interesting. I've never heard somebody say it in so much depth of doing the research to figure out how their life was going to be after their transition. Like a lot of people say, I want to do the research of like, what will T do to my body? And, they want the exciting parts, right? The hair. I see you too with the beard. They want the hair, they want the voice. And me, I was obsessed with the masculine physique. So it's like, but I didn't think about how will people perceive me until once my transition began. And so then when you start to look different, sound different, then you look around, you're like, the way we socialize, you're like, oh, but I'm, you think, oh, I'm a lesbian, I'm a stud, but then you're like, wait a minute, no, I'm not. To this person, now I'm this Black man. And so now before you weren't grabbing your purse because you thought I was just a Black lesbian, but now you grabbing your purse. Either way, I still don't want your damn purse. You know what I'm saying? So I want to ask you, like, during this research, right? Like, what was it that made you switch to say, okay, now I'm ready? Like, what was that point where you're like, okay, I'm ready right now?
I think what was going on in society, like we have, like right now, there the LGBTQ plus. That plus is live now. Like before it was just that LGBT. Well, different perspectives. Let me step back. Different perspectives. So my point of view of it was before, like it was certain barriers with the LGBT plus. Like that plus, it was, but now it's like you have the pansexual, you have the non-binary, non-gender conformity. Like you have a lot of categories now, based on how society has changed. So at that time in 2019, before the pandemic, it was a shift in my eyes where I said, okay, well, there's the shift now. Like I can really, there are a lot of resources out there that I can, connect with. There are not a lot of organizations that I can, get more information on, as well as it's not a bad thing in society to a certain extent, when it comes to transitioning and when it comes to being an alphabet, as people say, so I say, well, it's a new time and age. We're trying to move forwards in society, and I feel like more than ever, this is the time to really just push forward with this. I think at that time, my biggest challenge was the workplace because I had a full-time job in the public service. And a lot of my work was out in the community, out front facing. So, being in a quote unquote liberal administration, and trying to navigate transition, because like you mentioned, physically, I knew physically I was going to be changing, the hair, the buffness, everything is going to be changing. So I was like, okay, I hope I don't get fired from my job. I hope that, people here accept me the way that people outside of my employment accepts me, and going back to the research part was me also doing research on, I'm in New York, so doing research on the policies here when it comes to trans rights. So both on the local level and the state level, I did research on that. I also did research within my employment. So understanding the name change and policies, because I knew that it was going to take me a while to get my legal name changed. So I wanted to figure out, various ways in which I can change my name unofficially in the system. So you can do that. So you can, in your internal system, you can have, your preferred name, but within your pay stub and, the tax forms and everything else is still your birth name, and then also at that time, the preferred name was becoming an option. So now you see on applications, job application, you see that preferred name. That was not a thing. Preferred name. Even in internal systems, hopefully, not all jobs. I want to, make that disclaimer. But, there are some jobs that have that preferred name disclaimer internally, So I also wanted to do that type of research too, so that my transition to can be all together, all at once, far as that. So that was one of the things I really wanted to work on was that.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bois Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium? Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. Let's talk about that a little bit because transitioning at work. And so episode 7, I did a solo episode that was titled just that, transitioning at work. And so this year I began medically transitioning 11 years now. And so
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think, and congratulations to you. 5 years is a milestone as well. So congratulations to you. And so I want to ask you, just to tell us a little bit, how did you navigate that? So you did all the research, and how did it turn out when you first began, right? Because that beginning stages is rough. I know with me, I mean, if you listen to episode 7, I'll plug it into the show notes so folks can listen, but I planned it very strategically. And so we changed shifts, schedules every 6 months. And so I was blessed, right? And so I was able to pick when I was going to have, when I started T was 6 months after I was getting ready to have top surgery. So I planned it so that my schedule would shift would change from mornings to nights. And so the night people didn't know me. And so I was able to come back and I'm like, oh, I'm this brand new employee almost, right? And so how did you navigate doing that transition in that work?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. I actually re-listened to your podcast episode when it came to the workplace. Of course, I listened to all the other episodes, but I did listen to that before this episode. I will say that navigating the workplace when your transition it's a hassle. Like for me, of course, you're dealing with family, you're dealing with, friendships and, love outside of work. But, we spend a lot of time at work. So for me, I had to really just mentally prepare for what I was going to be up against. I would say the employer I was at when I was transitioning, was of course a public serving agency. And I thought that, if the city is very open with putting out there that, we are, for the LGBT community, the mayor is for, the administration is for. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that's across the board, right? And I came across a lot of challenges, within that scope. Mainly because a lot of people don't expect for you to, like I said, read the policies. Like with me, I learned this from my mom, you have to look into things because you can't have someone be your guide and give you all the information. Like you have to see it for yourself. And I was always raised on that. So with me trying to, transition within the workplace, I really wanted to just look at the policy like, okay, well, I knew that I'm not going to have my name changed right now. So how can I go about changing it internally? And I, came across a lot of challenges, mainly because there were people who were transphobic, in this agency who didn't really want to have my name changed in the system. I'm just going to be upfront and be honest. I actually had to go to the mayor's office to get my name changed. I had to actually escalate it to them, based on the challenges that I was going through. And I it was just hurtful for me to hear that I was going through this when I had, colleagues who were, either, were from, other countries who came in and, were telling me, were actually helping me. Like, yeah, I came in, I had to like not necessarily get their name changed in the system, but they wanted to have, so there are individuals who have their birth name, but they had like a parentheses, their American name and then their last name. So that's what they were doing. So for them to go through that process so quickly and easily, and they were like, yeah, Nas, you can do this, this, and that, submit the paperwork. I'm like, all right, cool. Let me do what you do. So I did that and I came across a lot of challenges. So it was just, for me, it was very hurtful, like very painful, to be discriminated against over just a name. So not my work ethic. Hey, you're not a bad employee. You're not none of that. It's because you are trans and we don't want to change your name here.
First of all, I want to say that's sad. And second of all, what difference do it make, right? Work is not to be taken personal, right? Like I'm not here for you, you're not here for me. We are here to do a job and follow policies and rules and SOPs or standard operating procedures, whatever your job goes by, right? And so what difference to you does it matter to just change my name? You know what I mean? It's about respecting another person, right? People don't have a problem when somebody get married and like, oh, congratulations, let's change your name, right? Nobody questions that, right? About at all, right? And so it's like I'm disappointed and I'm sad that you had to go through that. And so I apologize that you had to go through that, right? Of having it, just the simple stuff, right? So I can't even imagine what happened next. So once you began to medically transition outside of your name, how did that go?
Yeah, so outside of my name, I would say that the biggest hurdle with me was the name change. Um, for as far as my employment goes, I would say the medical transition, it went great. I found a good physician here. I also found a good endocrinologist here who was able to support me through my transition. Fortunate for me, due to the profession I'm in, my health benefits were great where they actually could cover my top surgery, which was fantastic. Of course, I had put down a little money, but I was just grateful for that to have that opportunity here. I would say being in New York is that's one of the advantage of being like in a big city is having those resources. I will say that. And even as I was looking at folks on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter on their transition, I saw the difference between individuals who live in LA or where you in the Bay or DC or New York or Florida versus people who are in a small town. They have a lot of hassles, and I'm very excited about that because I feel like, across the board, across this whole entire world that, it shouldn't matter where you live. There should be resources available to individuals who want to medically transition. Um, but I will say that, my transition journey medically has been great so far due to the resources. And that's one of the things I'm, so glad that your organization is really putting forth with that because we need organizations like yourself, you know, who are supporting trans individuals who need funding, for their surgeries due to a lot of challenges that they're facing because of the fact that they're in a city that have laws or policies that are against them or don't have the resources to medically transition. So
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, and that's why this organization was started, right? Because I had the privilege through my job that everything went smoothly for me, but
right.
also recognizing that everybody don't have that option, and it's not that easy for everybody. And so if you could just take that little bit of stress off somebody of just helping to cover their gender affirming surgery, right? And that's just the small of it, right? Because you mentioned in like all the different challenges that you met with name changing and all these different things, right? And that the physical part was the easy part, right? But for some people it's not, right? So if you could just take that little burden away from some folks, it makes a big difference. And so I want to ask you, because you did have some challenges, what does allyship look to you? So when I'm referring to allyship, I mean like in the workplace. So obviously, right, there are people that are against it for whatever their reasons are. But what did allyship look for you in the workplace?
Yeah, thank you. I would say there are companies that have advisory groups or affinity groups where they are dedicated to either dedicated to specific groups like LGBT groups, um, Black African American groups, Hispanic Latino groups, etc. So within the workplace, I was able to join those type of groups in order to find individuals who had either similar identity as me or who were allies to my identity. And within those spaces, I'm able to really connect with them and be vulnerable and openly share not just my challenges, but also success stories as well. So that's one example that, I've come across in the workplace. I would say when it comes to allyship, you want someone who is very authentic. You want someone who really understands you, your identity, as well as the purpose of you connecting with them, you know. Um, and I will also, say is that with allyship, it's something that should come organic. I feel like people use it for different reasons. Not from our perspective, but like people try to connect with individuals for, a motive. So you want to like weed those people out. Like, are you really an ally? Because you are considerate of my feelings, because, wanted to learn more and open about my identity, wanted to know more about how you can, support the cause. Or are you just an ally to just get information so that you can say that you're an ally? So it can be a talking point for you. You got to think about that too. And I will say, within the workplace, it's all about, your level of how you would like to approach it, with, coming out or revealing yourself as trans, is, up to you whether, you want to disclose that information to certain individuals within the workplace, because again, it's trust. And it's also that fear that, okay, if I say this, how will our relationship change? Because you may come off as quote unquote passing to individuals, and then when you share, it's like, yeah, I want you to know that I'm this, and it's like, okay, I hope that our relationship doesn't change or doesn't shift, and that's another thing too, that when it comes to allyship, that you really have to like really, be mindful of, you know, for those authentic allies, like those real allies, not those social media ones.
You talking about the real allies.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Bois Inc. I am also the host of Dem Bois Podcast. As you may know, Dem Bois provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO@DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode.
So I want to ask you this. So maybe somebody is listening right now, and maybe they are listening and they aren't a trans-identified person of color or trans-identified in general. And they're listening to this and they're like, you know what? I would love to be an ally, but I don't know what real allyship looks like. What would be your advice to someone on how to show up as a real, true ally?
Yeah, I would say an individual who isn't, judgmental. I would say an individual who come in organically as themselves and not be someone that they're not, Like you don't have to like research the lingo. Let me look this up to make sure that I'm, not saying anything to like hurt your like this come as yourself, like come organically when you want to connect with someone who identifies as trans or someone within the the LGBT plus Q scope. I would say also as an ally, you should know what is your reasoning for wanting to connect with this person or these particular groups. Like what is your purpose? I say that's a good question. Like what is your purpose and what is your reasoning for wanting to connect with this person? And how will you use your privilege to make this either, make this person feel wanted, either in the workplace or in the school setting or wherever wherever type of setting you are, and how you will defend this person when they're not in the room. How will you advocate for this person when they're not in the room? Or how will you advocate for this person if they're in the room, as well? Because it's one thing to be an ally in my face, but it's another thing to not be an ally when I'm not around.
Yeah, and I also think that an ally shouldn't ask us weird questions, right? Like I love how you say you don't have to know everything about me. It's about how you show up for me when I'm in the room and when I'm not in the room. That's true ally. Don't ask me weird questions about my body unless we're on a different level and I feel comfortable telling you that. But let me be the one to tell you. Don't ask me, right? You don't have to know what my top or my bottom look like. I say this all the time. If we're not going to be sexually involved with one another, you don't need to know what I have or don't have. That's none of your damn business. That's not an ally, knowing what somebody's parts are, just to understand, right? And so I also think that an ally is somebody is just going to defend you. If I'm not in the room and somebody is misgendering me, your allyship shows up then. I think it shows up less when I'm not in the room than when I am in the room. Because when I am in the room, I can speak for myself. Thank you, ally. Just stay over there and support me. But in the room, I can speak for myself. And I think that speaks a lot to allyship from my perspective, right? And we all have different versions of what we think allyship looks like for us. Because what I think an ally look like for me may not be the exact same thing of what you think an ally look like, right? And so just understanding and kind of like knowing your place as an ally and when to speak up and when to step back, right? And just like I said, when I'm in the room, just take a step back and let me speak up because I'm a part of this community. And so just be my cheerleader, be my congregation, and be my support. And then when I'm not in the room, then that's your chance to step up and say, hey, no, I'm going to speak for Sean, or I'm going to speak for Nasir in this way. Right. So, yeah. And so I want to go back a little bit because earlier you talked about, a little bit, you mentioned the intersectionality of race and gender, right, in public spaces. And so once you begin to transition medically, and you started to see those differences. How is that for you now, navigating it from the beginning when you navigated it and into now?
Yeah, I would say before transition, I really didn't think too deeply into intersectionality. Um, because it's like, you are programmed to really just, focus more like your ethnicity. Like, yeah, I'm black. Like I'm black in these spaces. I am black. School, home, everywhere I'm black, And then when it comes to certain spaces, it's like, all right, well, I am that stud in this space, you know. And then there's other spaces, which you know what I'm talking about, where you are that black stud in these spaces, So that was before transitioning. Black stud or black femme or whatever term, you are. And I will say, as I started to transition, I had to stop and think like, okay, I'm out here in the store or out in these public spaces, whether that's the store or school or workplace or the club, the bar, etc. I am now that black man, you know. And it took me a while to like really get used to it, because before, as someone who was a stud, it's like, yeah, like I'm that masculine figure. Like I was, you know, trying to be that way, like, yeah, I'm aggressive, like, yeah,
You
yeah.
had a certain kind of
But
swag about yourself.
certain kind of way,
Yeah.
you're looking at all the, of course, all the hip hop culture, culture, like the street culture. You're like, all right, this is my style. But as you are transitioning, as you're starting to pass, it's like, dang, like I am like for real, like I'm finally here. Like I'm finally recognized as a black man. Like I'm in the store, they say, hey, sir, but it comes at I want to say it comes at a cost, but you have to really just figure out how to really just really navigate it, mentally. Because it's like, all right, well, I'm a man. So like a lot of the issues that men go through, I'm going to be tied to that, you know. I'm going to be tied to that to a certain extent. So people who don't know me, they're going to associate me with that masculine stereotypes or um people who are getting to know me. They're like, all right, well, you're not a stud anymore. You're not femme anymore. You have to act this way. It's like, what? Like since I transitioned, I gotta act a certain way now. Seriously. So you gotta think about that. And then you also have to think about people who are still transphobic, that are still going to consider you as that black woman. They're going to disregard your transition. They're going to disregard your sexuality. They're going to be like, well, you are still she, her, and hers. I don't care about the he, him, his, they, them. I don't care about none of that. I don't care about your name. Like, you're going to be recognized as that. So that I had to also think about that too. Like, I'm telling you who I am. And you're like, no, I'm disregarding all of that. And that's also a lesson that I had to learn too, is that educating people is good, it's great, but also have to realize that even though you educate people, they're still going to disregard your feelings, you know. Even going back to the point where they're like, all right, well, you transition now, nah, so you ain't no femme no more. You can't say what's T, none of that. No, you gotta be masculine. You gotta be that. So, yeah,
That's
those were the
wow.
things that I have experienced and is still experiencing.
That's wow. I want to ask you this question, and I've never actually asked anybody this before, and I'm gonna be honest in my answer too with this. And we talking about first identifying as a stud and through our transition. But do you ever have moments when you miss that identity?
Yes, that there are moments where I do miss the identity.
I do too. I'm not gonna even kid you. I mean, I am secure in who I am as a trans man. But I just had a reason why I'm asking that because I had a moment the other day. Because just like you saying, when you were studying, you walk in that room, there's a different kind of energy that come with that, right? And women look at you differently if they're queer women, if they're attracted to masculine women, right? As opposed to you just walking in the door and like, oh, look at this just this black man, but not knowing who you really are on the inside, right?
Yes.
But I had a moment the other day at my job. There was a stud in the elevator. I'm gonna say stud. I'm assuming that that's what they identified as. And I was like, damn. Because even when you get in the elevator with a stud, you're in the same room, y'all got that little energy, right? You do the little head nod, or like I see you.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? We know who each other
yeah.
is. And I just was like, I got in the elevator and they probably was like, oh, it's just this regular old black man getting in the elevator with me. And I had that moment of like, damn, I missed that connection because I see you. You know what I'm saying? I see you. And so then I had text somebody at the time. I was like, man, I just seen this stud in the elevator and they got some nice little locks. And I was like, damn, I wish I had locks. I just had this moment of like stud envy. I don't know if that's the thing, but I felt like, damn, I missed that. Right. But not to take away from who I am now in my journey. Right. I'm very happy with who I am. But I had that little moment of, damn, I missed that. So I wanted to know if you ever feel that sometimes.
Yes, I actually agree. Like passing is cool. Like I wanted this. Like I'm not even gonna take it like you mentioned. I'm not even gonna take away from it. I want to pass. I am passing, but it's like I'm passing too much. Like they not even like you mentioned. When I see studs or individual in the LGBTQ community, they think that I'm a straight black man, and I'm like, nah, I'm trans. Like, so I do miss that because they don't know. Like, and that's the thing that I'm also learning is like, dang, like that that cushion, that comfort that I had when I was a stud is no longer there. Because I'm passing now. So it's hard for me for them to connect with me. I have to like explain it. If I'm comfortable explaining it, they may say, yeah, I'm this. I do this. I go to this lounge. I went to Pride. Da, da, da. And they talking to me like I don't know about what it is. I don't know about Pride. I'm like, yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm trans. Oh, what you are? Like, yes, that is me.
Yeah, that's just it be those moments. I also I don't really go to clubs anymore. I don't because I always I didn't want to take up space. But I want to go back for a second because I was going to say I always wanted to hold on to that piece of my identity. So it took me years, even after I began to medically transition, to change my F to an M because I really desperately wanted to hold on to that part. So when people, even though I'm passing and people look at my ID for whatever reason they need to see my ID for, I'm not just randomly showing my ID to people, but right, get into a place where I needed to be a certain age. And I wanted somebody to look and see this and then look at me and be like, oh, right. But then as it got to be a safety issue, then I was like, okay, or it wasn't necessarily a safety issue. It was just like I got to a point in my life where I was like, you know what, that F doesn't really matter on my ID anymore. But I held on to it for very long. And so I transitioned 11 years ago. I probably got rid of the F maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. Because that was like the last little piece of me that I wanted to hold on to. And so, yeah, I can honestly say that sometimes I do miss that connection. Yeah. So, but I want to ask you this.
Yeah.
So the difference between what noticeable differences do you see when you walk into spaces from being identified as a stud and being a man? So now what are the differences that you notice that people or how they may react to you?
Yeah, definitely. I would say a easy answer to that is like the store. Like, as a black man, it's like, all right, let me wait, let me make sure, let me look, see what he doing. So that's one easy answer. I would say also being in spaces where people don't really know your know that you're trans or know that you're a part of the community and you're around like a lot of straight cis men, and they start talking about women in a certain way, like for example, in the workplace. I had, a bunch of coworkers, they talking about this girl, that girl, da da da, and I'm right there, and I have to like nod my head. I gotta be not in agreement, but I gotta be like, engaged in the conversation, knowing I'm like, nah, like what? Why are you? Not being like minutes, but like, come on, why are you talking to her? Why are you talking like that about her or etc. And I and I would just say that oh, cis male species is it's a lot. It's intense, man. They something else. They are something else. So that was another test too. And I would say, going back to being a Black stud is that a lot of women would gravitate to me and be open to having conversations without having their guard up. But now women don't come to me because they have their guard up because they think, all right, well, he's a Black man, so he's not gonna relate. He's like one of them, So that's another switch too, is again back to those stereotypes, or me being, automatically connected with how men operate. Not to, throw shade in no man or none of that. I'm not trying to make this me bash anybody, but just saying that automatically it's like people have their guard up, you know, um, around me, because they think, all right, well, he ain't gonna understand, so
I don't think it's to bash anybody. I think it's kind of like speaking truth because we were socialized differently, right? And so some of
yeah.
those conversations and things that cisgender men do, we just weren't taught to do that. That wasn't acceptable to do. I Yeah, I mean, even in certain spaces, like I went to the barbershop not too long ago to get my face lined up. And just I mean, I've always went to the barbershop even as a stud to get my hair cut, but I was just sitting there now. This is a new barbershop, so I've never been in this barbershop. So me walking in there, they automatically think I'm a cisgender man. And so I'm listening to some of these conversations. And I'm like, this would never happen in the beauty salon, right? Like this is not a conversation that cisgender women would be having in the open like this and just don't give a shit about what they saying and how they say it. And so, some of those things I'm like, woo, goodness. Like, and it just makes you aware of like, I tell women that I meet even now that have male children, small children, this woman that I know now, and I tell her, make sure to teach your son not to talk like this or not to do that, right? Because then you think about it, right? We need to teach our kids to do better. Just because you a cis male child does not mean you get the free for all to do whatever you want, right? We should still have some type of standard of how we treat each other and how we communicate with each other, regardless of our gender from birth or whatever, right? Like, yeah. So I definitely, I guess I can resonate with some of the things you said about even going in the store. Like, why are you watching me? Like, even if, no matter who I am, I ain't coming here to steal. I'm minding my own goddamn business, right? And people think that we don't see those microaggressions. Like, we notice that shit. When you grab your purse, we see that, right? We expect it. Yes. And that's probably why we do see it, because we expect it. But it's like, you're not slick. We see that. I don't want your purse, lady. So, yeah. Anyway, but yes, so I really appreciate you for like sharing your story. And so this is the part of the show where I love to ask my guests a random question. And you've listened to some episodes previously, right? So you know what's going on. So I got a random list of questions that's constantly growing. I got 45 questions now. But this season 3, I'm going to do this differently. So it's going to be a take one, leave one. And so you take a question, but then you got to leave one for my list for another guest to answer in the future. So okay. I got 45 questions. Pick a number between 1 and 45, and I read you that question.
I'm going to say 15.
Number 15. Do you know this question? Are you prepared?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. Number 15. If you were stranded on an island, who are 3 people you would want stranded on that island with you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay. This is easy. I would say my best friend. She know who she is. My partner. She know who she is. And I'm gonna say my mom.
Ooh, your mom's? You gonna take your mom's with you, with your best friend and your partner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Together. We all together.
That's what's up. I love that. I love that. I was gonna say I don't want to take no damn body. I just leave me stranded. I can't think of 3 people I would take with me. Maybe my partner, not my son. He can stay here. That would be my only person. I'll just take my only person as my partner. That's who I think that could have my back and help me figure some shit out. But yeah, that's about it. Okay, well, I appreciate that. So now your job is to leave one question for other people to answer in the future.
My question is for the next person is, if they were given the opportunity to make a musical band, which 3 artists from 3 decades that they would choose and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. Wait a minute. Let me make sure I wrote this down correct. So if given an opportunity to make a musical band, pick 3 people from 3 different decades, one person from each. Ooh. Ooh, I like that. Ooh, I like that a lot. Okay, from 3 different decades. All right, I can't wait for somebody to answer that. That's a good question. Nasir, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Is there anything else you would like to say before we head out?
I would say, thank you for having me. If you all who are tuning in who haven't done so already, please make sure that you go on Dem Bois Inc. website. Make sure you look into the organization. Make sure you spread the love. So make sure that you share. And I hope that I have the opportunity, Sean, to work with you again.
Dem Bois, amplifying, transmitting color voices, yeah, we here making noise, making noise,